Hello everybody and welcome to Nostalgia Cackles. Today is a very special one because we're going to be celebrating the 40th anniversary of Zelda. Zelda unfortunately has a very quick anniversary. It starts in February, so I wanted to kind of jump on it and review every Zelda game from Zelda 1 to 3. I'm not doing what I did with Mario. That's not happening again. With that being said, Zelda is one of my favorite series. It's very important to me. It helped me understand reading and just gaming in general. So it's one of my favorite games of all time. With that being said, let's ask the question. Is Zelda 1 worth playing today? This is a 40-year-old game, so it makes sense to ask this kind of a question. Zelda has changed so much, not only just in the fact that, this is an old game, but in the fact that we went from 2D to 3D, and it seems that people prefer at least the 3D game. So it really is a good question, in my opinion, to ask if even playing the first one's worth it. Well, let's get into it. So here's the deal, if this sounds familiar, and if you've been watching my videos, it's because it is. I already reviewed BS Zelda, which is just a Super Nintendo remake of the Zelda series, and it's the same damn story. So with that being said, the Kingdom of Hyrule is attacked by Ganon, at the time called the Prince of Darkness. He possessed the Triforce of Power and seeks to take Hyrule's Triforce of Wisdom. To keep it from Ganon's clutches, Zelda shattered the Triforce into 8 pieces and hides them around the land, and sends her nursemaid Impa to find someone to save Hyrule before Zelda is captured. Impa comes across Link where he rescues her, and the story kind of goes on from there because she tells him to find the Triforce shards. With that being said, there's some revisionist history in this shit, because in the Zelda Collector's Edition for the GameCube, they say that there's 3 golden Triforces, which this is revisionist history, because that shit didn't happen yet. It was only 2 at this time, which were Power and Wisdom. There was only 2, okay? At the time. The reason why I bring this up is because I find this shit funny that the timeline is in flux at this point, and I feel like realistically not a lot of people have this book, but I think it's funny where if you look this up, there is some places that say that there was 3 just to kind of make the whole world cohesive. There is later, but not in this game. But that being said, the story is fine, right? It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It probably mattered to some people because it gives lore and stuff, but this game really isn't the one to give us the bigger lore for Zelda, so it really doesn't matter in the long run. So with that being said, let's move on to the gameplay. When it gets right down to it, The Legend of Zelda's gameplay is one of the perfect examples of why the NES was so popular and how we got gaming where we did today. Because this game was a really ambitious adventure game. Because if you said, looking at Pong and Pac-Man, hey, you're gonna have this game that has this giant map with secrets and epic boss fights, you probably would have looked at me like I was crazy back in the day. But Zelda managed to pull this off, and I think that that's kind of crazy that it managed to pull this off, because it just wasn't what games were back in the day. We've had a few similar to this, but nothing to this degree, and it makes sense of why people liked it and why it was popular for the time. It did a really good job at being an adventure game, but my god, playing this game now, I want to ask people that aren't watching my content, because I don't think you guys are in the age range, but if you are, or if you know somebody that is, can you ask them if they've played Classic Zelda, if they've beaten Classic Zelda, and then ask them how, right? Because this game came out in the 80s, before the internet, and all you had were, I think, call centers, and that wasn't that available. It's how did you figure this game out? I'm assuming that it might have just been through time, but this game is a lot of just figuring it out, and I think that that's great, but in the modern day, I might just be a weakling or something, because there's a lot of stuff in this game that I just cannot figure out. And it's not even out of a bad thing. I've played this game before, I've beaten this game before, but it's always been with at least a map or a walkthrough. And I'm not saying that the game's too difficult, because you can manage, but it's a lot more than I thought it was, or I could ever remember. And it might just be because time for me is different. When I played this, it was high school or college, elementary school too, when I played these games, so it didn't really matter if I beat it or not. But doing it for this video, it was wow, yeah, there's a lot more here, and there's a lot more to appreciate. Because there just is, and I think that that's really cool. I think that that is interesting that the gameplay was decided like this, and I can see why they said that Breath of the Wild was heavily inspired by this, because it's the same kind of concept of just, hey, there you go out there. The only difference is Breath of the Wild is argumentatively a little bit more guided, and that's why I'm wondering, because my brain cannot exist in that place of Zelda 1, because it's just go out there and go forth, good luck, right? Because, like, I'm just imagining that if you're a kid that has this game, there's a good chance that you might not even know that there's, like, dungeons you have to go and how many you have to do. Alongside that, there's also a second mission in this game after you beat it that you can do. And so it's like, games were worth their money back then, dude, I guess. Because, like, that's crazy. That's stuff that you don't even get today without having to pay for it, right? So, like, all in all, Zelda 1's gameplay is just crazy, and I love that. It definitely shows why it still exists today and why the series is ongoing, especially if you're just looking at the first one, because that's just what makes this game series great, all in all. With that being said, the gameplay itself is very self-descriptive, right? It's a game where you go, you get a sword, you go get Triforce pieces, that's it, right? And I think that that's just what makes this game crazy, is it's that simple of a concept. And it just blows my mind. It just blows my mind that it's that simple of a concept, but it's addicting. And I think that it just, all in all, the gameplay is crazy. It's just impossible for me to wrap my head around how this was made back in the day with such limitations. So, with that being said, let's move on to the presentation. I feel like when it comes down to the presentation of The Legend of Zelda, there's something simplistically iconic about this game. Is it the greatest looking NES game in the NES's library? No. It's kind of one of those games that's kind of deceptively simple, because it has a lot of details in places where you would actually have to play the game farther. The thing that comes to mind the most that's impressive to me is the boss design and enemy design for this game. It's weirdly interesting to me, because this game's presentation is so simple, but yet it's able to convey so much with so little, right? And I gotta say that I like it. It's a game that I've grown up around, so it's kind of just whatever in the long run, but I think it does just do a great job at conveying itself. It doesn't need to be overly impressive or anything, it just needs to exist. The most impressive thing about this game is just the fact that it runs so well with having so many enemies on the screen. The NES was known to have flicker, and this game does too, but I think that it manages it pretty well. And I do have to say that realistically, the actual design of the enemies, which is the most important thing in this game to me, is well done, alongside Link being so darn cute. I absolutely love the sprite design for Link within this game. It's, like I said, iconic. I don't exactly know what else to say about this game presentation-wise, because the music is the theme that we all know, and the dungeon theme is the one we all know. There isn't a lot of music within this game, but all in all, I do think that the game itself, the visuals, are iconic enough for it to just kind of stand out, and I absolutely love it. When it comes to The Legend of Zelda, it has been released so many times, kind of like Mario, and it makes sense because it is a very classic game for the NES. But with that being said, my god, there's a lot of ways to play this game. I'm not going to be mentioning like the eShop back in the day and all that other stuff, because those are no longer accessible, so I'm going to be trying to keep it to stuff that you can get your hands on today, for the most part. Some of these are a little higher priced than I think you're prepared for. With that being said, this game initially came out for the Famicom and the NES. We're going to start with the NES version, and that will set you back about $30 to $60. You will be paying in the range of that. I've seen people try to charge $100 for it, and so on and so forth. This might be because the anniversary is coming up alongside the time that I'm doing this video and recording this segment, but it also makes sense. I've seen this game go for that, and it's the price that I've normally seen it at within the modern day. You could probably get it for cheaper if you look for it, but realistically, this is also me talking about the gold cartridge too. There is also a gray cartridge, which I have not seen people sell it that much. It is sometimes a lower price, but all in all, I haven't really come across the gray cartridge as much as I've come across the golden cartridge. With that being said, we're moving on to the Famicom, where there's two versions of this being released. There was the disk system version alongside the actual cartridge as well. They are the same game, mind you, just one's on a cartridge, one's on a Famicom disc. And with that being said, the Famicom version will set you back about $40 to $50, and ironically enough, the cartridge version will set you back about $60 to $100. Once again, there's lower prices for these. It's actually very interesting to me that the cartridge version of this is a lot more expensive than the disc version. I always thought that it'd be the other way around. The disc system, I do know, has some belt problems though, and that might be the reason why. I don't know, I guess the reason why I'm kind of curious about it is because I would have always thought the cartridge version was more accessible, but we never got the disc system over here, so I'm definitely talking about something that I don't know anything about. The disc system just might have been more common, and it might have just been cheaper. I don't honestly know. I'm gonna have to look into that and maybe do a Disk System video? Who knows? With that being said, this game also came out for the Game Boy Advanced as Zelda Classic. There's 2 versions of this one as well. There's the American version, which you can probably pay about 29 to 60 bucks for. The 60 bucks is for it in box, but realistically you'll pay about 20 bucks and some change for this cartridge version of it, which is, I don't really know how to feel about the Game Boy games being this price, because 1, they're the most bootlegged, and 2, well, not the Zelda Classic. I haven't seen that many bootlegs, but I feel like when you have a high price for a game like this, it's kind of questionable. It might just be because it's for a collection, who knows, but I think that it's what you'll get it for. I haven't seen that many listings of it, but 20 to 30 bucks is where you'll mostly be at for this one. With that being said though, like the Mario collection, there was the Famicom version of it, and it comes with the beautiful box that I've talked about in Mario, and I like this one as well. This will set you back about $40 as well, and I think that if you must have the Game Boy Advance version, this might be the one in your collection. Unless you're somebody crazy like me that collects every Zelda game, it really doesn't matter. And to answer the question if you have it, no, I do not have the Game Boy Advance versions. With that being said, one of the confusing versions of this game is there was a Zelda promotional disc that includes 4 games called the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition. This was released on the GameCube, and this game has Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, and it also includes a demo for Wind Waker. I do not know the exact way you can get this game, but I do know that I have it in my collection, mainly because of my wife, and I'm pretty happy that I do, because holy shit, this game goes simply for $130. You can get it for a little bit lower in the $70 to $90 region, but god, this game is not easy to get your hands on. And it's one of those weird ones, because I would have never really thought that this would be on the GameCube, and initially when I recorded this, I didn't even consider this one. It wasn't until I looked at my collection where I realized that that is an option. With that being said, this game also was released on the NES Classic Edition, which will set you back about $70 to $90. You'll be paying within that ballpark if you want to do that. It does come with more games than just Zelda, but this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about games that you can play it on, as well as the Famicom Classic version, which will set you back about $80 as well. And last but not least, the oddest way to play this outside of the GameCube version is the Game & Watch version of this. Not the Zelda Game & Watch, but there was one that was released like Mario's was, and that'll set you back about $50 to $40. You will pay a weird range for this one. It also depends on if you want the box or not, which is fine. I'm going to be talking about a lot of these all over again. This is going to be a reoccurring segment of where I say something very similar for the most part for the Zelda franchise. And all in all, these are the most like physical ways you can get these, but outside of that, within the modern day, there is the NSO version or getting NSO, and I feel like if you're somebody that already has a Nintendo Switch, or if you have a Nintendo Switch 2 and you're into retro games, I think that that's just the best way to play this. All these versions are great, but unless you are a crazy collector like I am for this kind of franchise, or just you collect video games in general, I could not really recommend these versions. They're really cool to have as a collection, but like I feel like NSO is the way to go if you're not trying to collect them. But with that being said, I've said my piece. Let's move on to the goods and the bads. When it gets right down to it, what makes this game so good? I feel like it's kind of an outlier for like what it was at the time, and I think that like the thing about this, right, is it's something that I said in the Mario video, is that we always have to remember what gaming was like, and this is just a crazy one. Right? I think that this game is a lot more complicated than I feel anyone could have been prepared for, and I'm even surprised that Zelda's a franchise that was so liked and also just worked out, because this could have been a major failure. Unlike Mario, that has the arcade history behind it, this one doesn't have that, right? This one has that weird experimental existence that is hard for me to wrap my head around how people liked it back in the day, because it is a lot more of a difficult game, and I think that that works for what it was back in the day, because you would have had not as many games as people have today, and this probably would have been one of the few games that you had, right? Because games were expensive back then like they are now. So I think that this game was definitely worth its money because it was difficult, but also it had secrets and it had so much to it. And I think that that's really kind of what makes it good, right? Is that it was a bigger concept than most games at the time. And I think that this game would leave you wanting more from what it was back in the day, because once again, like I said, it's not like Mario. It falls more into that Metroid space of where it shows why the NES was such a good console. Because our arcade games are great, but we need stuff that makes games stand out from the arcade market, and this is one of those games that definitely did it, because this is a game that you can play over and over again. This is a game that you can save without having a password. This is a game that you can explore and almost have a new adventure each time because you find something new. And I think that that's really what, all in all, I think makes this game good, is that it has all that, and it's still worth checking out today, I think, because of that alone. It's really cool to see where Zelda is today and then look backwards. So I think that if that's what you're willing to do, I think it works out. The game also plays well. It's not too difficult to pick up, right? Of course, the game isn't perfect, mind you, but I don't think any first game is. So with that being said, let's move on to the bads. I think that I am way too spoiled with modern Zelda, in all honesty. I think I'm too spoiled with A Link to the Past, in all honesty. Because Zelda 1 is great, but them making the mechanic to swing the sword instead of stabbing, genius. Because the stab kinda ruins the game a little bit. There's been multiple times where I've had to position myself in a weird way to make the game work. Alongside another issue that I have with this game is the fact that it is very cryptic, and I understand and appreciate the idea of the exploration, and it might just be because of the time we live in, or it might just be because I don't have that appreciation 100% anymore, and it might just be how games have changed, but I don't know how many people are going to want that exploration, to seek that exploration. I think the best way to play this game is with a map, and I think that that might be blasphemous for some people, right? And that's fair, right? I think that having a map of where some of the items are is great, but I don't know if that's what everyone would want. I know back in my younger days, even suggesting that to some of my friends that were hardcore gamers, air quote, would have said that, like, you're not a real gamer for doing that. But I think that there's just so much in Zelda 1 that it's just better off to play it with the map. And I don't think that that's bad, but like the sensibilities of modern gaming today, I think the lack of guidance might be the problem. And I understand that you can say, oh, well, you can do anything, you could go to any place, you could do anything, but like, I feel like sometimes it's a little much, maybe? And I don't think that that's really a problem, right? I just think that outside of me, right? Because I'm nostalgic towards this game, so I don't mind all of this stuff. I don't mind coming back and probably turning my brain off and figuring this stuff out. And I think there's a joy to that. I think it's fun to play this with somebody for the first time and help them figure it out and have that map. I think it helps with that journey. But I don't know if everybody today would enjoy it as much, right? Because games like Breath of the Wild exist. If you want that exploration, you can play Breath of the Wild with a little bit more guidance. And that might just be a take that people don't like, but I do think that this one might be a little bit of a harder sell because of that alone. And also because the way, despite the fact that the game is good, it's just there are minor things that I didn't even talk about in the gameplay that do kind of make it harder to come back to. Like I said, the lack of a slash. Once again, that makes Zelda practically, in my opinion, when it comes to 2D, right? And that might alone be a turn-off point. Does that mean the game is bad? No, but I think that that's just, it's a solid start, but so is Fire Emblem, right? And I don't think Shadow Dragon, the first one, is the one that people would want to come back to when you have alternatives, right? And I don't even think that the game's bad. I just think that that's something that needs to be considered. It's something that I am just considering, because I honestly don't care. I'm going to be real with you, I don't care. I think that you should definitely try the game, especially since NSO exists, you can rewind, you can do all the stuff. I think just experiencing it is enough, but I do think that its difficulty and its time that it takes to explore without a map might just not be everybody's cup of tea. And that's just kind of the flaw with NES games that are more ambitious. It's the thing that suffers from Metroid, it's the thing that suffers from Fire Emblem, and it's the thing that a lot of NES games kind of suffer from because they were way more ambitious than the console could actually do, which is impressive, but I also feel like, you know, it's something that could turn some people off. With that being said, I hate saying this. I honestly hate saying this because I know it's gonna rub somebody the wrong way. It doesn't take away from its classic status, but I do think that it's something that needs to be said. With that being said, let's move on to the final thoughts. So, is Zelda 1 worth playing today? The answer is, yeah, I think it's a great game. It's not the greatest out of the 2D Zelda games or the top-down Zelda games, but I do think that it's still worth playing today, and I think that it's a really fun game, and it's worth it's salt all in all, and it definitely shows where this franchise started, and it did a great job at that. With that being said, there is a little bit of difficulties to it, to the modern day, such as the confusion, the loss, and the cryptic nature of the game in general, but it's something that you can get over with a walkthrough. So I think all in all, it's definitely worth playing today. Just remember, it's going to be a little bit more difficult than probably most 2D Zelda games. With that being said, what do you guys think? How do you guys feel? I'm doing a marathon, so we're going to talk about Zelda 2 next, but yeah. So, yeah, that's all I gotta really say. With that being said, I'll see you guys here next time on Nostalgia Goggles. Bye!